I'm grateful to the KEK's strong statement, yes, on the war in Ukraine, and for your words and prayers of solidarity, and this idea to bring attention to the Ukrainian crisis during this opening session, which is very important for us. The theme you have chosen, yes, is Christ's love moves the world to reconciliation and unity. And now I was asked to speak about the war in Ukraine, and the war is probably as far from Christ's love as it gets. However, the war shows, perhaps in a very radical way, the context, yes, in which unity and reconciliation should be searched. I'm sorry if my intervention is not very well structured. I had less than a day to prepare it. And I will start by showing the ways in which various Christian churches responded to Russian aggression. And then we'll raise three issues. Yes, that of unity, that of interconnectedness, and reconciliation. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, "The war is the father of all and king of all, and some he has shown as gods, others men. Some he has made slaves, others free." And we'll see how this war will end and whether Ukrainians will be made slaves or free. But I guess what Heraclitus meant is that war is a game changer. It creates new order, it restructures society. Yes, it is a moment when people, churches, ecumenical organizations are called to choose sides. Yes, and the state of ambiguity becomes less tolerable. There have been many gestures of solidarity and condemnation of war by various church leaders and ecumenical organizations worldwide. And here I would like only to speak about how the churches in Ukraine have responded. In Ukraine, we have the All-Ukrainian Council of Churches, which unites 16 churches and religious organizations, including Jews and Muslims. They issued a statement with words of support for Ukrainian armed forces and a blessing to the soldiers, asking the international community to help stop the Russian invasion. They also wrote a letter to President Putin, asking him to stop the war before it is too late. The churches have also reacted individually. The Metropolitan of the newly created Orthodox Church of Ukraine, Epiphany, the major Archbishop of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, Sviatoslav Shevchuk, have asked everyone to pray for peace, but also talked about the duty of citizens to protect Ukraine. They both asked international community for their support. The Protestants too were outspoken in their condemnation of Russia's aggression. The German Evangelical Lutheran Church of Ukraine insisted that the peace we must pray for should be a just peace, and I quote, "which will result in the expulsion of the aggressor from all occupied territories and a fair punishment for the crimes committed," end quote. It called those who can serve in the armed forces to join the defense of the country, and invited brothers and sisters from abroad, yes, to provide diplomatic, international, informational assistance and humanitarian aid. The Ukrainian Union of Evangelical Baptist Churches, which is probably the biggest Protestant denomination in Ukraine, took a more pacifist stance. But still they are shocked by what is going on. The pastor Antoniuk, who is the head of this union currently, he asked communities to pray, and he said, "Our weapon is prayer." And he also mentioned the need to provide hospitality to the refugees, yes, which of course will appear out of this conflict. I think I would like to dedicate a separate moment to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, which is part of which is in unity with Moscow Patriarchate. Yes, those of you who had the patience to listen to the 1 hour long speech by President Putin on the 21st of February, which announced the recognition of two separatist republics. You will remember that one of the reasons stated for why Russia must intervene in Ukraine is, I quote, "In Kiev they are preparing reprisals against the Ukrainian Orthodox Church of the Moscow Patriarchate," unquote. Well, yesterday, the head of this church, Metropolitan Onufry of Kiev, called the Ukrainian invasion to be, I quote, "a repetition of the sin of Cain, who out of jealousy killed his own brother. Such a war can have no justification either before God or before people," end quote. And I think it's an important statement. It might have arrived a bit late, but better late than never. Since the start of the Ukrainian crisis, this church always insisted on spiritual and cultural union with Russia, pretending to be apolitical, neutral, and was often criticized for not taking position. Today, I believe that the injustice of what Russia is doing is so obvious that the Ukrainian Orthodox Church cannot remain silent. And it is good that they refuse to be exploited by Russia propaganda. They are now saying, "You come here to save us from the Nazis, but we do not need you. We will fight you." Metropolitan Onufry's confrere in Moscow, Patriarch Kirill, came short of condemning the war or even asking to stop it. He limited himself to, I quote, "call on all parties of the conflict to do everything possible to avoid civilian casualties," end quote. And that's it. Why do I focus so much on these declarations? Because I believe that those declarations issued by the churches, at night, without much time for editing. There you can read the whole ecclesial identity of their church, of those churches. Yes, the statements reflect how churches see their own position within society, how deep their enculturation goes, how they see their link to the people they work with, how they relate to nationalism and warfare, how they interpret scripture. And the moment is really apocalyptic, yes, in the etymological sense of the term. Apocalypsis is unveiling, revelation. Churches reveal themselves. Ecumenical organizations reveal themselves. Now to 3 points I want to make. That of unity, that of interconnectedness, and reconciliation. Ukrainian churches have shown a rare moment of unity. And I think war leads to unity, to more division or to more unity. And this unity, I think, is what Ukrainian people need today. At the same time, this unity might contain risks. We will see the effect the war will have on the unity of Ukrainian Orthodox Church with Moscow, and on the dialogue between two jurisdictions in Ukraine. However, it is reasonable to expect that the influence of war on Ukrainian Orthodoxy will be tremendous. Of course, we might wonder whether inter-Orthodox unity or inter-Christian relations in Ukraine, which conceive of dialogue as a service to national cohesion, does not transform Christ's call for unity into a secular slogan, yes, a war motto. And the raison d'être behind such unity should not be left unquestioned. Yes, a church which reduces its role to the service of a nation and its interest betrays its universal vocation and eschatological identity. But unfortunately, war might not be the best moment for such a nuance. And we need to survive fast. I suspect the war will also lead Ukrainian Protestants, especially the Baptists and the Pentecostals, who are majority Protestants in Ukraine, and who sometimes tended to live in relative isolation from what was going on in the country, to feel more responsible for society at large and to the country's predicament. This leads me to the second point of interconnectedness. In the Brothers Karamazov, yes, Markel of Dostoevsky, Markel, the brother of Starec Zosima, says, I quote, "Every one of us has sinned against all men, and I more than any. Everyone is really responsible to all men, and for everything." When questioned by his mother on how, being so young and innocent, he can be responsible for the world's evil, Markel answers, "I do not know how to explain it to you, but I feel it so, painfully even." I suggest that this is a profound illustration of this inexplicable, incomprehensible interconnectedness of all. And we see this with integral ecology, with COVID. Yes, we depend, with the discussion on sanctions on Russia, how interconnected we are. One could wonder whether Dostoevsky's wisdom makes part of the canon of Putin's traditional values he said he is defending in Ukraine in his message of 2 days ago. However, what I think is important today is that churches and countries of Europe can also feel painfully, even as Markel said, their connectedness to what is going on in my country and their responsibility for Ukraine. I hope that churches in Europe, spiritually united with Ukrainian Orthodox, Protestants, and Catholics, may feel compassion and active solidarity as a body, one member of which is suffering, and not let Ukraine suffer alone. I will now speak about reconciliation between Ukrainians and Russians. We do not know how the war will end, but it will end one day. I studied in St. Petersburg. I traveled to conferences and taught summer schools in Russia, published in Russia. I met some of you for the first time in Moscow. I have received many words of support from Russian Orthodox clergymen and lay people over the last 2 days. Many Russians have protested against the war, both in Russia and abroad. Some were arrested, and it demanded a lot of courage. And they are a credit to the Russian people, an example for Russian religious and political institutions. I think this Russian resistance to war is important. It is important for Ukraine, so that Ukraine might not hold Russians collectively responsible for what the government is doing. It is important for the people of Russia, to keep some semina verbi, yes, some rays of light in the midst of madness. And it is very ironic that people who speak against the war are often the so-called liberal secularists rather than the disciples of Christ. And one of issues I see that you are rising here is how to, deal with unity and reconciliation in this Europe that gets secularized. So here is what Vladimir Soloviev says, in his On the Decline of the Medieval Worldview. I quote, "If Christians in name have betrayed the purpose of Christ and would have ruined it if only they could have, then why can't those who are non-Christians in name, who renounced Christ in the word, serve the purpose of Christ? In the gospel, we read of 2 sons. One said, 'I will go,' and he did not go, and the other said, 'I will not go,' and went. Which of the two did the will of the Father?" So the stance against war expressed by some Russians is very important, at least for the sake of reconciliation, which sooner or later will come. To conclude, last August, our Institute of Ecumenical Studies in Lviv launched a project on ecumenism and peace building. And we started studying foreign cases of reconciliation, the Balkans, Northern Ireland, Israel, Palestine, etc. And I would like to quote a phrase from the project description. I quote, "One way of looking at the Ukrainian crisis might be through defamiliarization. This means we look at the situation through the lens of other conflicts which help us to maintain an epistemic and emotional stance from the domestic situation, allowing us to contribute to a rational and practical resolution of the conflict, end quote. Yesterday, we woke up in a situation in which defamiliarization doesn't work anymore because our family is under threat. Yes, no emotional distance is possible because both the reason and heart call us to stop this bloodshed. It is a moment when to be super partes means to be with those who suffer and are terrified. And it is a moment when Christ's love calls us to be united and supportive of those who are being killed for their desire to be free. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. And thank you for your attention. Thank you, Katerina.